sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer Podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer Podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer Podcast, and I'm here with Mr. Happiness, Bill Savage, right? The guy that nobody wants to deal with or talk to at the end during tech and contingency, right?
Pretty much so.
Yeah. So, I was talking to Sal about this a while ago. Like, how did you, and he gave me a little bit of insight, but like, how did you get involved in off-road racing?
Well, I was at a meeting at Mickey Thompson's house, and Harold Day at the time was the tech director. And he had wanted to include a Cecil Wright, which was the right place front end. And at the time, you could probably build a 1216 for $8,000 or less. And a Cecil Wright front end was $2,500. And Harold said, "No, you're wrong. It's only $500." And I go, "No, you need to check your facts." And so we called on Mickey's phone down to Cecil's place. And I says, "Hey, I want to get a front end for 1216. What's that going to run me?" He says, $2,500. Harold was out and I was in. I've been stuck here ever since. So
that's like right into tech director during the Mickey Thompson era.
Yep.
And were you racing before that and building cars?
Yes, I was, yeah.
And like, how'd you get started on that side?
Some friends of mine had started in off-road, and I really didn't know anything about it, but I was welding up a bunch of parts, and I finally said, well, I really need to go check this out and see what it is. So I went down to Baugh and said, well, this looks like fun. I need to do this. So I started doing it.
And what was your first car build?
Class 11.
Nice.
Of course.
Yeah. The OG stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's funny because, like, in that time, like, there was no, like, internet, right? And no instruction manual. It was like everybody was doing stuff and looking at each other's car and going, okay, that's how he did it.
That's pretty much how I was going back then. There was definitely no information available.
And so prior to that, no mechanical skills or anything like that? Or
well, I had a welding shop. I owned a welding shop at the time, and I'd already graduated from college and had opened a shop, and I was doing basically chop shop welding, and that's how I got kind of sucked into doing all the race car stuff. Nice.
And then so you're in as tech director. Like, was that something that you're like, hey, this would be cool? Or,
no.
Yeah, I was
I'm
wondering.
Still looking for the door. I'm sure there was one when I came in.
Right. Well, that's what I was asking, because it's such a tough job. I mean, you're the guy who takes Christmas presents away, right?
Unfortunately, so.
Yeah. And so what was that like? Like, so, cool, you're in, and that was short course happening at that point, or?
No, Mickey hadn't started MTG yet, so it was all desert racing at the time.
Right. So it was what year was that, like 1970s?
It was early 70s, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so just at the beginning of, like, the biggest growth of the next 2 decades, basically.
Yeah, basically so.
Yeah, and then, so that's got to be pretty incredible, going from that to seeing, where we're at now and, everything in between. I mean, that's a hell of a ride.
We've been up, we've been down. We're still we're back up again right now, and I'm glad to see that and hope it maintains.
Yeah. And then, so, in addition to being the tech director and literally writing the modern rule book for everything that we have now in racing in terms of safety, like, you also built quite a few vehicles.
Yeah, I built quite a few vehicles over the years.
And so to talk about some of those vehicle builds, because, I mean, it's a big span, but, like,
Well, everything from Class 11, the trophy truck, I pretty much built them all.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about, I mean, I remember meeting you real briefly at it was Colin's shop, right? And you had just built the Savage trophy trucks.
SPD trophy truck.
Yeah, the SPD trophy trucks. And it was really cool because Larry Ragland was explaining to me the design of the truck and why he liked it, and that it was designed around his preferences of visibility and seating position and stuff like that.
Yeah, Larry and Brian had a lot of input on that truck when we first built that one, and that was the first of, I think, 6 we ended up building in that style.
Yeah, including BJ's.
Including BJ's, yeah.
Which won 2 Baja 1000s,
yeah,
right?
BJ did real good in it.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of those things where, like, because you and I work together and we're privy to a lot of fun arguments from racers.
Occasionally.
Right? And they always come over and they're like, well, he doesn't know shit about this. I'm like, oh, really? Here's the list, right?
Here's the list.
Yeah.
I'm sure whatever you're driving, I've built one of them.
Yeah, what was or is there something that you built that's kind of your favorite build?
Well, that first trophy truck for Brian was one of my favorites. I did a lot of work for NASA and their lunar rovers and stuff. Those were fun just because of the technicality of them. The paperwork was a pain in the ass, but the build was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine there was some paperwork with NASA.
God.
Yeah, and like that was the era too that like NASA was looking at off-road, as well as there was God, who are the DARPA guys?
DARPA guys, yeah, we did some work for DARPA. We built 36 Tauruses for them for their self-driving vehicles when they did their big test.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty rad.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many stories from off-road that I've heard, and I'm like, yeah, that's like a whole book, Like I remember, a few years back them racing the Humvees and, basically having to, fix it every 50 miles or so because of things breaking.
Oh, in the early days, it was who finished as the guy that won. Now they're finishing on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, the tech's come a long way.
Tech's come a long way.
Yeah. What's that make you feel like, when you see it now and like, you've seen this evolution from like these super basic VW powered vehicles to, the stuff that we're getting into now, like the 4-wheel drive trophy trucks and stuff like that?
I like seeing it. It's came a long ways from the early days for sure. Guys used to get together with a case of beer and build something in the backyard, and now it's primarily builders that are building the stuff. So
yeah. Yeah, no, I think a lot of builders, that are, influenced by you and other guys who kind of paved the way.
We did a lot of work in the early days. There was nothing off the shelf, so you had to build all your own parts, from shocks to rear end housings to everything, basically. Yeah,
it was funny. Like one of the cool experiences I got to have was when you got inducted into the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, and I didn't know a tenth of the stuff that you'd done, right? Yeah. So Todd came to me and was like, hey, we got to do something cool and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, great. And then, I get a list of people, and some of them, like Trevor, I had no idea who Trevor was until, I started looking into him. And then I'm like, holy shit, this guy's designed a lot of race vehicles.
Trevor's been around for a long time and done a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really smart guy.
Yeah, very smart guy. And then, and then too, like hearing, how much respect Sal has for you, and, how you really shaped this culture, in terms of racing and what was safe and what wasn't safe. And it's a hard thing to tell people to go home, that they don't have a safe vehicle.
Well, the primary thing is safety first. You want to make sure the guy doesn't get hurt. I really feel bad when people get hurt on my watch. I mean, we've had fatalities, unfortunately. It's a dangerous sport, like all racing is, but you try to be as safe as you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah, and now with the speeds that we're going, it's critical.
It's definitely critical now. Speeds and the weight of the vehicles have increased quite a bit.
Yeah. So, one of the many things that I know you were involved in is pro trucks. Like, talk about that, because that idea of like having, a spec class and, racing on all the same stuff and seeing like who is the best racer,
Yeah, that was Ivan came to me with that idea, and I had thought about it for a long time. And Ivan having the juice to pull a lot of that stuff together because of his connections. It was a class that should have been driver only. Everything should have been pretty much equal, and it worked out pretty good for a while.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, when you look at like, kind of the who's who now in trophy trucks, a lot of those people came through that class.
It was a good class. There's a lot of good people that got into it.
Yeah. And and since then, like Trophy Light, there's been some other things tried, but it hasn't really, it hasn't really blown up. I mean, I guess you could say 6100,
6100s really came quite a ways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was cool.
All right, Chase. Number 23. It's 2023. This championship's yours. Let's show these guys what's up.
Easy, boys. It's not over yet. Big dog still gotta eat.
Whatever you say, big dog.
Seriously? These fools think I'm pride? They know the deal.
Yeah, and then again in doing this piece for your induction, I got to kind of create this timeline of all these like really cool things, and it was funny because how Todd is. Todd's like, he's not a very how should we say this in a polite way? He's not a very organized person when it comes to his thought process.
No.
But when stuff comes out, they're gems, right?
No, he does a good job in the finish.
Yeah. And it's like, I remember, him and I would have quite a few drinks together at Horsepower Ranch, and I felt like I should have been taking notes. And he goes into this tirade telling me about, the Red Line snowmobile. Don't you know about that, Matt? And I'm like, no, tell me about it. And the way he explained it is like, you basically built the world's fastest snowmobile, took it to the trade show, and essentially half the companies had to leave the trade show and go re-engineer, what they were putting out on the market after that.
It kind of pushed the business a little bit forward, yeah.
Yeah. And why did you go into the snowmobile side?
I had a client that came in and asked me if I'd build a snowmobile, and I basically answered, if it has got a motor in it, I'll build it. And he had the money to drive it, so we built one.
And what was the kind of magic sauce in that snowmobile?
It was a tube chassis, which they weren't using at the time, and it was long travel. It had a lot more travel than what they were doing at the same time. And same thing with the front end. We basically took the A-arm suspension we were using in off-road and adapted it to the snowmobiles, and it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, and essentially, that led to what, especially the high-performance snowmobiles are today.
Pretty much so.
Yeah, it's pretty badass. Obviously with Todd, one of the other high notes was the wide open cars, right?
Yeah, those were fun.
Yeah, which still, they're racing with 01, right, here in the States, and they're putting on tours every day, and and still running in Baja, putting on tours every day and racing. Like, I don't think people, I think when people look at those, they're like, oh, it's buggy, but they don't understand that it's like a purpose designed vehicle to be as bulletproof as possible because of the amount of use that it's going to get.
Oh, they've got millions of miles on them, and it's mostly by guys that have never been off-road racing.
Yeah.
And they run a pretty fast pace down there. Todd set a fast pace for them, and they held up really well.
Yeah, I run into people constantly, and business people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I did wide open," and during the Todd era too, when it was like pretty fun and extravagant. You had Tommy Morris involved. And lots of other Earl Desidero and lots of other good people.
No, it was a lot of fun. That was a good project. I enjoyed that one a lot. I took both my sons down there on a tour. They had a good time. My youngest son put me off a cliff. He was probably only 14 or 15 at the time, never driven a stick shift. He did a good job too. He put it off the cliff, and it was pretty tall because I had enough time to say, this is going to hurt when we hit the bottom, and we still weren't there yet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's, again, it's got to make you smile when you still see those cars running. And how many years ago did you build those?
Oh, God, that's got to have been 22, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
and they're still going.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven those cars in tours. I got to drive them in races. Actually, it was really fun. I got to race Battle at Prim, and it was one of the ones they had swapped the engine, so it gave it more power.
Oh, when they put the Subarus in.
Yeah, and it was fun because it was like we were supposed to be the tour class, and in the back and not challenging anybody. And somebody forgot to tell me that because I started picking guys off, and they were getting pissed off. Class 8 trucks and stuff, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm
There's
like,
a tour car passing them up.
"I'm passing you," So and they work really well, And then again, talking about the SPD trucks that you built, those still racing today.
Still racing today.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's got to make you smile.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of like the evolution of like what some of the 4-wheel drive builders are doing? Especially
It took it long enough. I mean, when we were doing the Nissan stuff in the mid to late '80s, I guess that was, 4-wheel drive's just faster everywhere.
yeah,
It's just a lot more expensive to build, a lot more expensive to maintain, and it's just a lot trickier to set up and get done. And Mason's done a really good job. They're doing really good.
yeah. Yeah, I'm really impressed, and I know they have a new evolution coming. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Was there an era that that you were operating in, and you're just like, "Holy shit, this is badass"?
It was probably when actually Cal Wells, Sal, and I had came up with the trophy truck rules and watching the trophy trucks progress, because basically we were coming out of Class 8 and guys were kind of bending the rules too far in Class 8, and it kind of got ridiculous to the point where I could have thrown the whole class out. And it's like, all right, it's time for a change. And then I had done the Nissan in Class 4, which was a tube chassis, and Cal had done the Toyota that was running Class 1, and those were kind of the prelude to the trophy truck.
Yeah. Did you think though, like at that point, like, okay, there's eventually going to be 100 trophy trucks?
No, because of the cost, you would have never imagined there would be that many of them. I'm just amazed at how many there really is.
Yeah, and then the economy crashes in '08, and
well, we were construction driven for most of the years. You look at all the guys, the big players in our sport, they were all construction guys, and construction goes up and down. So when construction hit the bottom, so did our sport, because it was all extra money you guys had to spend. Now we've so diversified. I mean, you got guys that are into software, hardware, construction, car salesmen, car dealership owners. We're not as locked into one area of the economy like we used to be.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Was there a factory program though too that you were involved in that was like,
I've done several, but Nissan was probably the most fun for sure.
Yeah.
So they were spending good money. They were pressing to win. They wanted to win. So they pushed all of their players hard. And it made for a good time in the bottom line.
Yeah. Wait, and who else was involved in that program with you?
Jack Johnson drove for me. Mark McMillan drove for me. Had a lot of guys, had a lot of engineers, had a lot of prep guys. We were running at one time 6 trucks. We were doing Jack's truck. We were building a truck for Roger Mears for short course. We were doing MTG stuff. We were did Sherman Balch's pro, what was that, Class 3. We had a lot of things going on. Plus, we were doing their GTO cars, and we were doing all the suspension and roll cages for their GTP cars. So it was definitely a good time.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, in that, did you, obviously, like you just told the story of becoming a tech director really early on, right? Like, and then, your time was over with SCORE, and then we scooped you back up, right? Because if you hadn't had enough, Are there things left that you feel like, hey, I want to do this build, or things left you feel like you have to accomplish?
I'd like to do a Class 1. Maybe the Class 1 Unlimited that we just got through doing. that's probably about the only thing I've really got any interest in right now.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I mean, like, obviously, you don't necessarily have to be a technical director at this point.
I don't.
Like, what do you think compels you, to continue to do that?
It's the safety primarily. I feel concerned that if our sport has too many safety issues or liabilities, that it's probably going to be over with. I mean, it's the liabilities nowadays and the attorneys and stuff. It's just tough to deal with, especially with insurance companies the way that they are. And I'd hate to see this go down the tubes because safety wasn't adhered to like it should have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because you're doing short course tech.
Yeah, I'm working for Champ Off Road right now. I was working for Lucas Oil, and now I'm working for you for Martelli. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, that's something that's like, when we have conversations, to me, the thing that I always like is your knowledge base is so vast. It's not just in desert racing or just in short course. You're in off road,
Yeah.
That's rad.
Racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
I mean, what about experiences with drivers, like good, bad,
There's been a lot of guys that I really like. The Wilson family, for instance, I really care for the Wilson family. And there's been guys that I haven't cared for at all.
Sure.
And it's all attitudes. I mean, I'm just there to help you. I'm not there to harass you or screw with you. I just want to make sure you're safe and that you come back, whether I like you or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a weird misnomer, too, that, like, people build all these stories in their head, Like, I get it a lot, too. They're like, they associate me with a brand or, they go, oh, yeah, you took money from Polaris at one point, so therefore you don't like Can-Am. And I'm like,
it's amazing how that stuff works.
I'm like, hey, man, just pay me money and I'll like you.
I'll like you.
No, but, I mean, what's that like? You still face that, and it's like that's one other thing too, is like you're not afraid to tell people no.
No, not at all. Because the bottom line is still about safety. So if I got to say no and it hurts your feelings and you get pissed off, I'm sorry, but at least you're still alive and not hurt. And that's the main thing in life.
Yeah, 100%. Is there anything in the sport right now that you see that you're like, that you really dig or, that you're impressed with? I mean, again, you've been around the block here.
I like the four-wheel drive stuff, both in the desert and stadium. I like the Pro 4s and the stadium racing or short course racing, and watching the Pro 4s and trophy truck. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad to see that it's here and hope that it stays.
Yeah. Favorite race?
The Baja 1000, the long one for sure.
Yeah, the point to point.
Yeah, point to point.
What do you think about this year reversing it?
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see how that worked out. Sal talked about that years ago, and several times we considered doing it, but it's such a long tow. And back then, in the early days especially, maybe only 50% of the cars would make it to the finish line.
Yeah.
So you got 50% of the guys that are towing down there that aren't going to make it to the finish line. So it's a long tow down and a long tow back.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see how the entries come into this year. So
yeah, I'm really curious. I'm excited to go down and and just see it firsthand because I think the logistics of it are going to be a lot more difficult than people understand.
It's going to be a lot trickier. You got to move all the chase trucks down there. Everything that's going normally at the start line up on the north end of the peninsula is now going to be down at the far southern end of the peninsula. So you got a lot of equipment that's got to go down there. Because typically, if you're going to have problems, it's going to be early on in the race and not late in the race.
Yeah, and I think the guys that have really good racecraft, i.e. the Rob McCachrans, the Larry Rosslers, I mean, obviously the McMillans are going to fare better because of their knowledge base.
Yeah, because of their knowledge base, and they've got time to pre-run. They've got logistics behind them. They'll know where to put their chase trucks, where to put their pits. The guys that aren't familiar with it that much will have a difficult time. Where they'll have a difficult time, but not as difficult.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What about a favorite driver that you like watching?
Off-road, probably be Rob
Yeah.
McCracken. I mean, it's just he's got pure talent.
100%. He's the goat.
Yeah, he's just there.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch his son now, too, because his son seems to be having the same talent. And he's a very nice kid. I like him. He's easy to deal with. He's very polite.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with his level of maturity at his age.
Yeah, Rob has done a good job raising him.
I know what I was like at that age.
I know how I was acting at that age. He's far ahead of where I was.
Yeah. Do you have a thing that's still to be involved in all this that's like, your favorite thing,
It's probably the engineering and figuring out how to make things work and make it work as well as you possibly can, and hopefully better than what other guys are figuring out, so that you can beat them on the track.
Yeah. When you were, in school, when you were younger, did you ever think like, you would have this level of engineering knowledge, and be working on trophy trucks and projects for NASA and projects for the military?
No, I really didn't. No, I did not foresee that in my future at all.
Yeah. That's pretty cool though.
No, it's been a good life. I have no complaints.
Yeah, it was honestly like I said before, it was really fun for me doing the Hall of Fame induction video because, you can either kind of phone it in, and go, oh, yeah, cool, we'll put these photos and whatever, or you do what we do and what I really like doing where I'm like, Trevor, let's go track him down and find him and interview him. And it was funny because, he's getting up there in age and I'm always like, hey, we don't want to take up a bunch of your time. And we probably talked for another hour and a half to the point where I think it was his wife was like, hey, you guys need you guys need to leave now, right? Because he'll just keep talking. We started talking about, four-wheel drive and different things. And he started explaining, the problem with plunged axles and all this stuff that I didn't know, like I'm like kind of had a cursory knowledge, but it's like you get to ask Obi-Wan Kenobi about something. That's what it's like.
Yeah, that would be Trevor.
Yeah, so it's really cool to be able to dissect that and kind of go below the surface of who you are as the tech director who gets to take away people's Christmas presents, right? And learn about all these things that you've done, because I think I talk about this quite a bit. Like your generation was what was ingrained in you guys is to not boast about your accomplishments, right?
Yep, definitely.
And you just kind of did stuff and you didn't talk. It wasn't like you're on social media going, hey, I'm going to do a selfie right now,
This is the first interview I've ever done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's incumbent upon me to talk about this stuff because it shows how rich our culture is and how it's filled with people that are passionate and very intelligent.
One of the things about off-road is you've got such a diversity of people and a diversity of talent. That's really what makes it entertaining.
Yeah. Is there an engineer builder, like a guy out there too that you look at and you're like, this guy's going to be a rock star?
There's a couple of guys that I like and that I'm kind of following. Nobody that I'd like to mention right at the moment, but there are a couple of guys I'm watching for sure.
Yeah. I think there's again, social media, it's funny because like they'll put stuff out on social media and I like it because it's I understand that in them kind of essentially boasting about what they're doing, that they're teaching people, right? The other kids are like, oh, like, that's what a slapper arm is, or that's what a, this is, right? And, fortunately, unfortunately, that's the world we live in, right? And it's I look at it as kind of like a war for mind share, for attention. So, sometimes it's a little bit over the top, and you're like, hey, have you ever built a winning vehicle, right? Then shut up and
shut up and listen.
And listen, right? But I also think that, in that it does spread the gospel. Not that's how it works, right? So like you could sit here and criticize somebody like BJ for pushing his social media, but ultimately, I've had dozens of people talk to me about his videos, right? So that's a good thing because they see off-road. But anyways.
No, it's a good thing. I mean, you can look at it and say, well, he's just being boastful. But the bottom line is he's getting the word out about our sport that people are picking up that may not have ever picked up any other word about our sport.
Yeah.
So then they'll look deeper into it and maybe get involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That wasn't too painful, right?
It wasn't too painful.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works chassis lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.